Hello everyone and welcome back to round 9, or rather welcome back to Norway Chess 2021. It's round 9 and we have a really crazy game between Richard Rapport and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Rapport still leading the tournament and their classical game ended very quickly, and that's why I'm already presenting their Armageddon game, since both of them ended very quickly. And this game features an incredible opening and an even more incredible moment, so you guys will have a very enjoyable pause the video moment, and then we're going to discuss the rest of the game as usual. But you know, it's just so crazy. You'll see what I mean by this. So Rapport with the white pieces opens with knight to f3. So he goes for the Reti opening, and this is his chance to get back at Nepo, because if you remember, in the first half of the tournament, their classical game was also drawn, but Nepo won the Armageddon with white. So now Rapport has a chance with white to do something about this. So knight to f3, going for the Reti opening, we have d5 and now d3. This is not the way one would usually go about it. It's the old Indian attack. We have g6 and now knight b to d2, preparing e4, and then white wants to bring the knight to c4. Bishop to g7, Nepo fianchettos the dark square bishop, e4, and now knight to c6. And now there are some games where g3 was played, also c3 is an own move, but the move that Rapport plays, e captures on d5, is a new move. So already as of move 5, we have a completely new game. Usually not something you want to play because you already developed the knight to d2. So if queen captures on d5, like for example in the Scandinavian defense, you don't have the standard knight to c3 gaining a tempo on the queen. But okay, queen captures on d5 and now g3, preparing to fianchetto the light square bishop, and then we're gonna have some indirect pressure towards the black queen. So knight to f6 by Nepo, bishop to g2, and now we have queen to e6 with check, saying, okay, this is Armageddon. If we draw the game, then I win the match. So you either play queen to e2, and then I don't even have to trade right away. I can play knight b4, go after your c2 pawn, and this will be very problematic for you. Or you have to play king to f1. But this is not a problem for Rapport, as he would have probably played king to f1 regardless of what black plays. So here Nepo castles to safety, and now knight to c4. So very nicely placed knight here. And now what do? The knight placed on c4, although it's really nicely placed, it's an imprecision by Rapport, and Nepo can take advantage of it with rook to d8. Because it already introduces the threat of queen captures on c4, because if pawn captures, rook captures on d1 with check. So a slight imprecision, but hard to pick up in such a quick-paced game like an Armageddon. So here Nepo just goes back with the queen to d7, we have bishop to d2, shifting the bishop over to c3, and now queen to d8. Nepo says, alright, I can see you're going really crazy here, slow down, I just want to play a normal, calm game and get myself, you know, maybe a draw, maybe more, but you know, we don't want anything too crazy, because he knows how you know, accomplished of a player Rapport is. So bishop to c3 and now bishop to e6. Again, you have some plans of maybe captures and then trading queens, as a draw is sufficient for you. So queen to e2 and now rook to e8. We have rook to e1, now with ideas of just advancing this pawn, and the king will remain on f1, maybe on g1 at some point. Queen to c8, preparing bishop to h3 to trade off the light square bishops, and Rapport of course goes h4 and doesn't allow it. Now both the rook and the bishop guard the h3 square, and Nepo of course plays h5. He doesn't want to allow any further expansion from white on the king's side. Knight to g5 now, putting pressure on the bishop here, and the bishop to g4, attacking Rapport's queen to d2, and now Nepo says, alright, my pieces are kind of nicely placed here, I just have to, you know, continue my development, and he played queen to d7. But queen to d7 is a move that blunders the entire game. It's hard to imagine that such a thing is possible in a position like this, but it's all, I'm not going to spoil it for you. Better just pause the video and try to figure it out for yourself while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this amazing opportunity that white got in an Armageddon game against the World Chess Championship challenger. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is of course knight captures on f7. And now look at this. What do you play here? If king captures on f7, if you don't capture the knight, then, I mean, you just lost the f7 pawn and you allowed this knight, this beautiful infiltrating move, then ideas like knight h6 check are possible. So black is just terrible here. I mean, he has no defenses left in front of his king. This pawn is now weak. This pawn will become weak, and so you would have to capture the knight. I mean, you can't capture it. You lose the game, but you lose the game whatever you play. But the point is, if king captures, knight to e5 check wins the queen. Yes, the black knight on c6 is covering that, but we just pick up the knight. Bishop captures on c6, and that's it. Black queen cannot capture, because if you capture, the knight to e5 check wins the queen, and if you don't capture, you've just, you're just completely busted. What do you play? There's really nothing you can play here. You could play something like queen to f5, queen back to d8. It doesn't really matter. We can capture here on b7. So everything is just falling apart here for black. You can go to b8, and then we can play knight to e5 with check. Just really, really ugly. King can go here, bishop to c6. It's a complete mess of a position, but white, of course, is just much, much better here, and there's really nothing for black to do here. So knight captures on f7, a beautiful move that unfortunately Rapport missed. Well, first of all, it's a very quick time format, Armageddon 7 versus 10 minutes, and on the other hand, you don't expect Nepo to miss something like this, so you're not even looking for it, which is something that every chess player tends to make a mistake on, but it's just what happens. So here, after queen to d7, we have knight back to e3, attacking black's bishop here, and now rook 8 to d8, and now Nepo's position is perfectly fine. We have b4. Rapport saw in a couple of my previous videos that b4 is often a winning move for white, so of course he attempts this, and now you could try a lot of things like e5, for example. If b5, then knight to d4 is very strong, but he goes for knight to d4 right away. And now, what do you play here? Well, we don't want to allow this knight to remain here. We have to constantly keep an eye on this knight to f3 move. Okay, for the moment, not possible, but it's just a nuisance. So bishop captures on d4, queen captures on d4, and now bishop captures on b7. So Rapport's still getting a lot out of the position. Queen to h6 by Nepo, and now knight captures on g4. We have knight captures and queen to f4. He now offers a queen trade and hopes to retain his extra pawn. Nepo says that's not happening. We're gonna trade queens, but you are not keeping your pawn. G captures, and now e6. And now his plan is to just bring the rook over here and then, threaten both of these pawns. So here we have bishop to c6 attacking the rook here, but now rook back to f8. You could also go rook to e7, but still you will not be able to double up. So rook to f8, and now comes b5. So this pawn will not be a problem if this rook comes to d4, but still just rook to d4, going after the f4 pawn. So of course Rapport defends it, rook to e4, and now rook f to d8. And now what do you play? Well, there's really no good way to improve with white here. Maybe idea like rook to h3, but it still looks very odd. What is the rook actually doing there? So here we have knight to f3, attacking black's rook and kind of forcing black to capture on e4. Rook captures on e4, bishop captures on e4, and now of course we recapture our missing pawn. Bishop captures on f4, and now the material is completely equal, and we have bishops of opposite color on the board, so everything is looking favorable for Nepo to get at least a draw in this game. King e2, we have knight to f6, and now a4. We have king to f8, and now rook to a1, trying to create some chances here on the queen side. King to e7, now comes a5, and now king to d6. Of course, it's important to activate our king in the endgame. Knight to d4, and now comes knight captures on e4. Here, a very nice idea for Nepo might be bishop to e5, just saying, okay, this is not working out at all for me. But he goes for knight captures on e4, d captures on e4, and now king to c5, attacking the knight here, and if the knight moves, of course, the b5 pawn. So knight to c6, offering this pawn for a rook, and of course we will move the rook. Rook d2 check, king to f3, and now your bishop is attacked, but just king captures on b5. You say, okay, you capture the bishop, I'm gonna capture the knight. Rapport first grabs the a7 pawn with check. Now he has a pass pawn here. If the knight moves, it could be very dangerous. King to a6. Of course, Nepo will block the pass pawn with his king. Knight to c6, and now, of course, we have to get our bishop to safety. So bishop to d6, and now our c2 pawn is hanging, and what do you do here? Well, here we have c3. It's not a lot, but Rapport had to play something. You could also try some other ideas, maybe something like knight to b8 with check, trying to get the king away from this a6 square, but then king to b7, and you still don't have way of pushing this pawn. If you play rook to b1 check, we still just play king to a7, and now, okay, what do you play? You can play a6, but then you still lose the c2 pawn, and you really haven't made any progress here. If the rook moves to help out with the defense of the pawn, you lose the knight. If the knight moves, you lose the pawn, so there's no way to do anything with this passed pawn. So instead, after bishop to d6, Rapport tried c3, but this just runs into not that, obviously, it's a mouse slip. Rook to d3 check, king to g2, and now rook captures on c3, putting pressure on the knight. Knight to d8, now going after the base of the pawn chain, and now f5. We have e5 now, attacking the bishop, trying to get the bishop to capture. Then we play rook to e1 and go after the e6 pawn. So bishop captures on e5, rook to e1, and now bishop to d4. Rook captures on e6 with check, but now, of course, you don't grab the a5 pawn. You could still blunder the game. It's not a problem, just knight to c6 check, and now you either lose the bishop or you have to give up the rook. So something would happen there. So after rook captures on e6, we have king to b5 by Nepo, and now Rapport finally gets to push his passed pawn. Pawn to a6, but now rook to c2, going after the f2 pawn, and now the a7 square is covered by the bishop, so you can't really push that either, and there is no way to actually achieve anything here. So king to f1 was played, trying to get the king at least closer to that queen side. Rook captures on f2 with check, king to e1, and now rook to a2. Just very principled, putting the rook behind the pass pawn maneuver. Rook captures on g6, now comes rook captures on a6, rook to g5, and here we have king to c4. And it was in this position on move 49 that Rapport resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. It's just well, okay, you could grab some pawns here, but let's say you grab a pawn, you create your own pass pawn, king to d3. And now look at this. The king covers all of these squares. The bishop covers this. There's no defense. Rook to a1 checkmate is coming, and it's just very ugly. You could prolong it, of course, with king to f1, but once, you know, the black king and bishop get such a nice grip on the opponent's king, there's simply no playing this. And, of course, both of them know this, and Rapport, of course, resigns. So yeah, a really nice game by both of them. Rapport got that beautiful chance, but like I said, you do not expect to be, you know, given such a gift by the World Chess Championship challenger in this position that we discussed. Just, I mean, it's move 16, queen to d2, queen to d7, and now for knight captures on f7 to even be a possibility. It's simply insane. But it was in the position, and it's a pretty, you know, big shame that he couldn't find it, but, you know, who would expect such a thing from Nepo? So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We're gonna cover the other games as well, and only then discuss the standings. I would like to thank Tom Deralo, Isaac Hitzgraf, Francis Air, Sri Gotham Yoshua, and Chet S. Blunderful for contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of this very nice event, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And it would seem that Nepo won both of his encounters with Richard Rapport. See you soon, guys.